Good afternoon, and welcome to NTIA's Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives Centers of Excellence webinar series, which is a part of NTIA's Internet for All webinar series. The title for today's webinar is Closing the Digital Skills Divide: What Higher Education Leaders Need to Know. My name is Kevin Hughes. I'm the acting director of NTIA's Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives, and I will serve as the host and moderator for today's webinar. And I'd like to welcome you all for joining. We'll get started in a few moments, but first, just a few housekeeping tips. Today's webinar is being recorded. A recording of the webinar, transcript, and slides will be posted to NTIA's Broadband USA website within 48 hours. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat, and we'll try to get to them, as many of them as possible as we can. Time permitting, we'll also have a Q&A section at the end of all of our presentations. So with that said, let's begin. NTIA's Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives plays an important role in the Internet for All initiative by promoting equitable, high-speed internet access and adoption at historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, tribal colleges and universities, TCUs, and minority-serving institutions, and in their surrounding anchor communities. OMBI's guiding vision is to facilitate greater capacity, access, equity, and adoption within minority communities overall, and to achieve digital equity for minority communities, and to address and close the digital divide across the United States and its territories. With OMBI's oversight of the Connecting Minority Communities Pilot Program grant, we work closely with our HBCU, TCU, and MSI awardees, which are working to help students build in-demand skills and connect to long-term career pathways. At OMBI, we continue to work to provide greater opportunities within the broadband ecosystem for people of color, veterans, seniors, and other unserved and underserved groups. Today's very informative webinar will be divided into 3 sections. Section 1, Closing the Digital Skills Divide: What Higher Education Leaders Need to Know. And our presenter there is Amanda Bergzon-Shilcock, Senior Fellow at the National Skills Coalition. And she will discuss new research based on millions of help wanted ads, which show that employers overwhelmingly require technology-related skills across all industries and most occupations. This briefing will share a peek at this newly released data with a special focus on issues of concern to HBCUs and HSIs and other minority-serving institutions. We'll also learn how businesses need for workers with digital skills differs from demographic to demographic, and other factors such as educational level or years of experience. And then we'll transition to section 2, where we'll cover workforce development, the future demand for states with BEAD funding. And our presenter there is Lucy Moore, Special Policy Advisor, Office of the Assistant Secretary of NTIA. And this briefing will provide an update on workforce development initiatives through NTIA's IJA grants and programs. And then we'll move on to section 3, where we will cover connecting with CMC grant recipients. And here we'll have the opportunity to hear directly from CMC awardees who are using their funds for workforce development or training programs that lead to good paying jobs and long-term career pathways within broadband. At OMBI, we continue to work to provide greater opportunities within the broadband ecosystem. And in that section 3, our dynamic presenters will be Brandon Dismore, Program Coordinator, Economic Development and Training Center, Oklahoma State University Institute of Technology. Then we'll hear from Amber Randolph, Senior Vice Chancellor for Administration and Economic Development and Chief Financial Officer of Rutgers University. And then third, we'll hear from Marlon M.J. Jenkins, founder and CEO of Technogrid. So let's begin our first presentation with our first presenter, and that is Amanda Bergzon-Shokok, Senior Fellow of the National Skills Coalition. Amanda, over to you.
Thanks so much, Kevin, and thanks to all of the NTIA and OMBI crew for creating this opportunity for us to be in conversation today. I'm going to make sure that folks can see my slides here, and then we'll get going. So just a quick note, I'm going to move pretty quickly through these slides. They will be publicly available for you to download and review after today's webinar. So you will have them available to be able to review at your leisure. And we warmly encourage you at National Skills Coalition to borrow our slides and graphs and use them in your own presentations. So please feel free to do that. Just credit National Skills Coalition. So as Kevin mentioned, I'm going to share what National Skills Coalition has learned through our recent research and what the implications are, particularly for those of you working in higher education and working in particular at minority serving institutions. National Skills Coalition is a big tent bipartisan coalition of workforce and education advocates. We've been around for about 20 years. We are a group of workforce boards, community colleges, labor unions, chambers of commerce, immigrant serving organizations, adult education providers, really anyone with an interest in workforce development and an interest in making sure people have access to high quality skills training. As you all know well, the digital divide is not just about making sure people have access to broadband, as important as that is, or digital devices, but very much also about making sure they have the skills they need to be able to use those tools. And we know from people telling us over and over again that one of the main reasons people enroll in digital skills classes is because they want to get a job or they want to get a better job. And so we decided to actually get some firsthand data on what employers were looking for in terms of digital skills. So in particular, we decided to look at a set of help wanted ads. We looked at 43 million help wanted ads from 2021 in collaboration with our partners at the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Now, I'm obligated to tell you that the opinions expressed in this report reflect those of the authors, that's me, and do not necessarily reflect those of the Federal Reserve System or the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. So what did we find? We found overall that 92% of jobs in the US require definitely or likely digital skills. Let's unpack those terms for a minute. Definitely digital skills, as you see on the slide here, are things like Microsoft Excel or the Python programming language, things where if you saw them in a job ad, you'd say, oh yeah, that's definitely connected to the digital world and technology. Likely digital skills are things like bookkeeping, where yes, you can do bookkeeping the old-fashioned way using pen and paper and a ledger, but most people these days are using a software product like QuickBooks or Peachtree or even good old Excel. And then not digital skills include manual tasks like ironing or changing diapers that childcare or elder care workers might do, but also things like problem solving. And we found that jobs at every level of education require digital skills. So the jobs that require only a high school diploma or an associate's degree overwhelmingly require digital skills, all the way up to those that require a PhD. So this is not something that's just for white collar workers or just for people with bachelor's degrees. It really is for folks at every level of the labor market. And that's important because when we're thinking in a higher education context, those of you who are at two-year institutions already are thinking about this, whether your students are on the credit-bearing side or the non-credit side of the house. But even in four-year institutions, some of your students may be earning certificates or be getting short-term credentials that are not necessarily a degree. And that this digital skills are important even for those roles. We also often hear about the myth of the digital native, right? This idea that, oh, young people all grew up with technology and so they're comfortable with everything. The reality from our research is that young people, like workers of every age, have fragmented knowledge. So they're comfortable with some digital skills, but they're not comfortable with others. So they might be great at texting or making a social media video. That does not mean that they're going to be comfortable creating a budget spreadsheet, using electronic medical software, or working with collaborative robots. And so one of the most important things for higher education partners to think about is how do you help people build from the skills they have to the skills they need? And that's important for workers and students of any age. And we know that higher education can help people build digital skills in areas like fiber optics, broadband tower technicians. But let's talk about some of the other industries and occupations. Digital skills are in huge demand in the agricultural sector. So increasingly, farmers are using John Deere tractors and combine harvesters that include onboard computers that can manage things like fertilizer or irrigation or just GPS technology for navigation. You have to be able to troubleshoot things like that, right? Increasingly, grain silos are coming equipped with industrial Internet of Things devices that, again, the farm workers need to be able to troubleshoot and manage. Firefighters, the US Department of the Interior talks about wildland firefighters needing to have digital skills. It's hard to think of a job that requires more manual labor and time out in the field than firefighting, and yet increasingly we also see that firefighters need digital skills. I talked before about cobots. The average price for some of these robots has dropped from $1 million just a few years ago to $180,000 today. And so particularly for those of you who work in career technical education programs, particularly in the community and technical college side, you're seeing this already, not just in the advanced manufacturing realm, but in other industries as well. As the price of robots drops, what happens is that humans' jobs change, and you become someone whose job it is to manage robots, oversee them, troubleshoot them, and interact with the HMI, or the human machine interface. Certainly during the pandemic, we saw the huge growth in telehealth, which means that even reception desk staff at doctors' offices are now responsible for helping patients and doctors to navigate this software. This is a picture from a food processing plant. These workers used to be in charge of picking up and lifting 40-pound boxes of frozen meat. Now the robot does that, and the worker's job is to use the HMI, that's the blue and white screen you see at the right, to be able to oversee and interact with the robot and troubleshoot it. The construction industry is another area where we've seen huge growth in the demand for digital skills. One company we interviewed said that frontline construction workers are using 3 to 5 different mobile apps every day on the job. Blueprint technologies, safety technologies, needing to be able to snap a picture on a job site and submit it to the general contractor on a building job for an RFI. And of course, journalists and other workers are often using multimedia software as they're capturing, editing, and producing stories. Our research found that jobs that require digital skills pay more, on average, a 23% higher wage if you're moving from a job that requires no digital skills to a job that requires one definitely digital skill. So there are real economic consequences to helping students and workers build these skills. And as higher education institutions are thinking about the gainful employment regulations and the other post-secondary attainment goals that many of your governors have established, thinking about the economic impact for students and workers is really crucial. Our research also looked at the demand for digital skills among small businesses. Now, why does this matter? If you're a really big company and you're posting 500 job openings a year, you can afford to either run your own in-house digital skills training program or go down the street to your local community college and get them to create a custom training program for you. But if you're a small or a mid-sized business, if you are posting 1 to 50 job openings per year, you really depend on your partners in the public workforce development system, in the community-based nonprofit system, and in the higher education world to help you build that talent pipeline of workers. And as you can see from this slide, The small businesses in our study were almost as likely as large businesses to need workers with digital skills. And it's not just foundational digital skills like those that are sort of basic, and I'll talk about those in a moment. It's also those industry specific skills that I was just sharing examples of. So it's not enough to just kind of park people in a Microsoft Office class and say, okay, you've learned some basic digital skills, you're good to go. They really need to be woven throughout the curriculum in both 2- and 4-year institutions, helping people build digital skills in the real world context that they're going to be using them. So what do I mean by foundational skills? This is kind of the obvious slide, but I just wanted to be clear. Job ads that say things like data entry or computer literacy or spreadsheets, right? Foundational skills that would be needed across lots of different industries. Industry specific skills, I have a couple of examples on this slide here. Retail industry, retail analytics and consumer goods software and robotics both show up. Manufacturing, ERP or enterprise resource planning software from Oracle or SAP is really big. Property management, Yardi software, really big. So what can you do with this information that I've just shared with you? You can use this information to ensure that public policy investments, whether it's through Pell Grants that your institution receives to support workers and students' education, or the new Digital Equity Act and BEAD funding that this agency oversees, or perhaps you are a CMC grantee, a Connecting Minorities Community grantee. You can combine the findings from our study with census data to better target your education programs and services and close equity gaps. What do I mean by that? If, for example, you see that workers of color are disproportionately concentrated in the accommodations and food services sector, that's a way to think, particularly if you have hospitality programs at your institution. How can we help those workers build digital skills that are relevant either if they want to stay working in the hospitality sector or if they want to pivot to an adjacent sector? You can explicitly embed digital skills throughout career technical education and other credit-bearing programs. You can collaborate with community-based organizations and others that have earned the trust of community members to build inclusive broadband workforce career pathways. And I'm not going to go into too much detail on that because the next speaker, Lucy Moore, is going to talk about NTIA's work in this regard. Make sure that people can access the supportive services like childcare and transportation that are so important in being able to persist and succeed in their education. And make sure that there's financial aid available to support high quality short-term programs. Of course, we know that Digital Equity Act and BEAD funding can be used for digital skill building, but there's also a lot of other demands on those funds. So speaking up for the importance of them with digital skills is critically important. And making sure that your higher education institution is investing in the digital skill strategies that we know work, which I've summarized here on this slide. In particular, things like contextualized and integrated curricula and work-based learning models, as well as portable and industry recognized credentials. We have an additional report with more recommendations, and that's highlighted on this slide here. And again, you'll have these slides to refer back to. I know I've been going quickly through them, but you'll be able to refer back to them at your leisure so you can dig for details and check out our full report. So I have just a few minutes for questions here, and I will take a look at the chat and the Q&A to see what's been showing up. I'll also just flag that there are a few additional slides here, which again, you can look at when you look at the downloaded version of the slides, but there's a slide with my contact information, and then there's slides with some additional resources from National Skills Coalition, including our recent reports. So let me open up and take a look and see what kind of comments that folks are sharing in the chat. I'm seeing that there is a question about industry recognized credentials. Is there agreement on completing a course versus passing an exam? So the short answer is it really depends. And I'm going to stop sharing now so I can see the screen here. It depends on which credential, right? There's a nonprofit called Credential Engine that has created an online repository called Credential Finder, and I'll put a link to that in the chat. And And they've documented over 900,000 different types of credentials in the US. And some of them are competency-based. So you pass an exam or meet other competency requirements in order to earn the credential. And some of them are more traditionally academic kind of seat time based credentials. So there's wide variation. And a key part of knowing which industry recognized credentials have value is making sure that you as educators are in communication with employers in your community to understand what they're looking for to hire. I'll give one quick example and just see if there's any other questions that have come in the meantime. So one example from our work comes from the Nashville Chamber of Commerce. Nashville had been approached because Google Career Certificates were offering some of their classes in Nashville. And the chamber said, we're going to survey our employer members to see, do they notice if this is on somebody's resume? Would they care? Are there particular occupations that they'd be interested in? And so they put out a survey to their employers, and they got back a couple of useful pieces of information. The first thing they found out was, yes, there were some positions that hiring managers would care about if they saw a Google Career Certificate on that person's resume. So knowing that there were a couple of occupations that did matter for was useful. But the second piece of information they got was even more valuable. And that was when the hiring managers said, we would only care if they had earned the Google Career Certificate with the Python programming language add-on. Okay, so now that's actionable information, right? Now you can give a student or a job seeker useful guidance to say, yeah, we've heard from local employers, they would care if you earned this credential. And they would particularly be interested if you earned this add-on credential. And that turns it from a nice to have to something that people might actually want to spend their time and effort acquiring. I see one other question has come in about whether it's possible to use grant funding for devices and software for training. The short answer is it depends on which funding stream you're looking at. And I'm going to defer to my colleagues at NTIA to talk in particular about their funding streams. What I will say is there are a lot of federal investments in workforce and education, whether that is the SNAP employment and training funds for people in the food stamps program, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act funding, the TANF funding. There's a whole host of different federal funding streams. Each of them have their own rules, but in many cases, you can indeed use federal resources to support the purchase of devices or other curricula to support learners in acquiring digital skills. Happy to chat offline about other things, but as I said, I will defer to our NTIA colleagues in a later Q&A if they want to elaborate on that as far as the CMC grants or other NTIA grants. I'm at the end of my time here, so I'm going to go ahead and pass to the next presenter, but I've seen a couple of requests for links in the chat, and so I will also drop a couple of links into the chat as the webinar goes on here so that folks can check out the full report and other resources that I shared. So let me pass to the next presenter. Thank you so much.
Amanda, thank you so much for that very informative presentation. And this is the sort of value that OMBI is providing to our stakeholders by providing access, to you will, to industry leaders such as Amanda, who are able to share great insight in terms of what we can do. Those of you who are on the call who represent HBCUs, TCUs, and MSIs, she spoke specifically about some of the things that you can do to basically help address the digital divide. And I really hope that you take heed to her comments. And this is an opportunity for us to really advance America through the efforts that we all are doing. With regards to NTIA and the Connecting Minority Communities pilot program grant, towards the question on equipment, yes, that is an actual part of our grant, which our funding goes towards providing devices, laptops, tablets, as well as internet connectivity, not just for the campuses, but also for home-based subscriptions for the students and faculty. So I think what's really great about NTIA's efforts and OMBI's efforts is that today is a new day. The funding that we've received for broadband is transformational. Across the board, we're seeing funding that will go towards helping to close the digital divide. And so we'll transition on to our next speaker, who is Lucy Moore, Special Policy Advisor for the Office of the Assistant Secretary at NTIA. Lucy, over to you and your comments.
Thanks so much, Kevin, and thanks for sharing the slides. It's great to be here with all of you. Amanda gave an excellent overview of the importance of digital skills in today's workforce and how to deploy the National Skills Coalition's findings when implementing workforce programs. I'm now going to speak, as Kevin mentioned, to our work at NTIA on workforce development within the Internet for All grant programs. Next slide, please. Thank you. Thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, NTIA is administering 4 historic programs that will help to close the digital divide in this country. And we're going to need a skilled workforce in order to accomplish that goal. So while workforce development will be the main focus of my presentation today, I wanted to first quickly ground us with an overview of the 4 main Internet for All programs that NTIA is administering around $48 billion. So the first is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD, which provides over $40 billion primarily for building high-speed internet infrastructure with an emphasis on parts of the country that are currently unserved or underserved. I'll go into a bit more detail on this program on the next slide. The second is the Digital Equity Act programs, which provide $2.75 billion to promote digital inclusion and advanced equity through the provision of devices, as well as affordability and adoption programs. So again, to the question that was asked in the chat, this is another opportunity that funds the provision of devices in many states. Third is the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, which received an additional $2 billion to the existing program to help tribal communities expand high-speed internet access and adoption on tribal lands. And finally, the Middle Mile program, which is a competitive grant program with $1 billion in funding to expand middle mile infrastructure and reduce the cost of connecting the unconnected. Next slide, please. So as I said, I won't spend too much time here before getting into the workforce pieces, but to go into a bit more detail on BEAD, because that is kind of the main focus of the workforce elements I'll be talking about today. The BEAD program will provide over $40 billion for infrastructure planning and implementation. The eligible entities for the program are the 50 states, DC, Puerto Rico, and the 4 US territories listed on this slide. One thing I'd like to highlight here is that workforce development and job training in support of the infrastructure workforce is an eligible use of program funding. The BEAD program has a very ambitious goal. We are going to connect everyone in America to affordable, reliable, high-speed internet access. And as a formula grant program, how each eligible entity achieves that goal will look a little different, but it's going to take a whole of nation, whole of sector effort. Next slide, please. So we know that expanding high-speed, affordable internet access to everyone in America will require a transformation in the telecommunications workforce. We will need thousands of technicians, trenchers, equipment operators, and laborers, just to name a few. But we also see this as a real opportunity. At the Department of Commerce and NTIA, we're committed to ensuring that the Internet for All programs create good jobs that offer fair compensation, a safe workplace, equitable access, and opportunities for long-term career advancement. Good jobs are the foundation of an equitable economy, and these efforts will have lasting positive economic, social, and health benefits on our communities for years to come. Next slide, please. If you're wondering what we mean when we say good jobs, last year, the Department of Commerce and Department of Labor partnered to release the Good Jobs Principles, which NTIA has prioritized as core values as we develop or as we build a stronger and more equitable telecommunications workforce. Good jobs are jobs that offer fair compensation, a safe workplace, equitable access, and opportunities for long-term advancement, just to name a few. For more information on these, please see the Good Jobs Principles released by the Department of Commerce and Department of Labor, which you can find online. I'm happy to drop the link in the chat when I finish up with my presentation. Next slide, please. In October, we at NTIA released a workforce planning guide to support eligible entities in the development of their workforce plans as part of the BEAD program, but it's likely a helpful resource for other industry stakeholders and for education leaders, like many of you on this call, looking to understand the BEAD program's workforce development requirements and guidance. The guide includes 4 main sections. Components of a workforce plan, which goes through those program requirements and guidance, developing a BEAD workforce plan, which includes proposed planning steps, pacing suggestions, as well as integration with the Digital Equity Planning Grant Program, strategies and examples that offer a range of approaches for meeting workforce requirements, and some additional resources to support the workforce planning and implementation process. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the workforce planning guide goes through components of a workforce plan and strategies and examples that offer a range of approaches for meeting program requirements related to workforce. The guide covers 4 components that must be addressed to create a successful workforce plan. In addition to compliance with federal labor and employment laws, eligible entities and subgrantees will need to design a plan to promote a skilled workforce, advance equitable training and workforce development activities, and effectively and responsibly engage contractors and subcontractors. Engagement with employers, education partners, and industry leaders will help eligible entities across all 4 of these components. And it'll also help create secure, safe workplaces and robust, diverse workforces to deploy high-speed internet. So for today's webinar, I'm going to focus on the 3rd strategy, equitable training and workforce development. Next slide, please. So when considering equitable training and workforce development requirements and guidance, eligible entities will need to determine how they plan to support a skilled and diverse workforce through recruitment, retention, and professional development. I'm going to go through some of the recommended strategies from the guide, some of which will likely be familiar to those of you who are running workforce or training programs. Next slide, please. Equitable training and workforce development encompasses 4 subcategories: workforce readiness, supporting a diverse workforce, outreach and engagement, and worker protections. Next slide, please. Workforce readiness programs can help facilitate the development of a diverse telecommunications workforce prepared to meet the challenges of high-speed internet deployment. Incorporating registered apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship programs, or apprenticeship readiness programs, as they're sometimes called, can actively support job skills development as well as DEIA in the workplace. Additionally, promoting flexible, tailored training opportunities can help further develop workers' skills and prepare them to take on additional responsibilities in the future. Next slide, please. Investing in workforce development can also help develop the skills of workers for BEAD projects while making workers more competitive in the job market long term. Additional strategies to promote workforce readiness include, and Amanda mentioned this earlier, providing wraparound or support services, which can create a stronger labor pipeline by supporting workers while they get the certifications or relevant experience they need. And so we're encouraging eligible entities to consider provisions of wraparound and supportive services such as childcare or transportation when considering potential subgrantees and developing workforce training programs. Eligible entities should also consider encouraging the establishment of strong career pathways which can offer workers an opportunity to not only obtain that first job, but also to enter into a pathway with advancement and increased wages on the horizon. Next slide, please. As eligible entities and their subgrantees aim to support a diverse workforce, we have recommended the following strategies. Partnering again with pre-apprenticeship programs for underrepresented groups can offer workers industry recognized credentials that will bolster the candidate experience and create a more accessible pipeline into the telecom industry. Providing equipment alongside other wraparound services is another way of reducing the financial barriers for individuals seeking to join the trades or other workforce development programs. And we're also encouraging eligible entities to support workforce diversity and hiring practices by requiring or strongly encouraging subgrantees to make documented and measured efforts to hire and retain workers from historically underserved groups. Excuse me. Next slide, please. Additionally, cultivating a supportive working environment by promoting inclusive workplace policies such as anti-harassment policies, equitable training opportunities, and employee benefits such as childcare, pregnancy, and parental support can help create a more supportive working environment and promote employee retention. Offering targeted mentorship programs have been shown to be an important factor in recruitment, advancement, and retention of women in the trades. Eligible entities should also think about developing these programs and encouraging their subgrantees to do the same. We recommend that eligible entities support a diverse workforce by sponsoring DEIA programs, making DEIA training available to all workers and aligned to the organization's values. And lastly, promoting accountability and transparency will go a long way in helping close feedback loops on hiring and retention, allowing for course correction and improvement. Next slide, please. When conducting outreach and engaging various partner organizations, we are recommending that eligible entities explore the following strategies: committing to transparency, communicating with various partners early and often to build strong working relationships and establish trust with local partners, creating a feedback loop to help partners become true working partners in the process and engender trust, giving partners a seat at the table to offer flexibility to their organizations when seeking input, given possible burdens on organizational capacity, and using local coordination to further workforce goals will allow partners to be involved in many aspects of BEAD projects efficiently, considering and respecting their time. Next slide, please. So the last set of strategies I'll cover are those related to worker protections. Eligible entities may consider as part of the BEAD program, recruiting or requiring or encouraging prevailing wages to be paid by subgrantees to improve desirability of jobs and ensure fair wages on BEAD projects. Promoting project labor agreements can offer stability, higher wages, and additional training to workers while minimizing the likelihood of worker disputes and strikes. Similarly, promoting labor peace agreements can protect financial interests while advancing worker rights. And encouraging robust benefits will better allow workers to balance their job and family commitments. Next slide, please. So to wrap up my portion of the presentation, how can you get involved? So first, stay involved in the planning of high-speed internet programs in your states. Get to know your state broadband offices and stay in close touch with them. If you don't already know how to contact those folks, our website, internetforall.gov, has an interactive map that you can click on. I can again share that link momentarily, and you'll find the email addresses both for the state broadband offices, but also for NTIA's federal program officer in your state or territory. They will be a great resource to you as you look to be involved in the planning of these programs. Second, educate and convene local stakeholders. States will need a clear picture of their workforce needs in order to properly plan for these investments. And so tell states about the needs you anticipate and lend your expertise on how to design effective training programs. This also leads into the third recommendation, which is to think about opportunities for the BEAD and digital equity programs to support your existing workforce initiatives. And lastly, since I know many of the folks on today's call are joining from higher education institutions or other training providers, please share examples of existing workforce development or training programs. We've been collecting these and other best practices to share with eligible entities and industry stakeholders as they look to scale out workforce development programs in their states, but I'm sure you know of examples we haven't yet identified. So that concludes my presentation. Thanks so much. I'll hand it back to Kevin to take us to the next portion.
Thank you so much, Lucy. That was a great presentation. And I just wanted to just piggyback on the last portion of Lucy's presentation, where she was talking about getting connected to your state broadband office. This is very important when it comes to pursuing opportunities under the NTIA's IJA grants, such as BEAD and DE, for example. And the Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives, we are here to assist minority stakeholders in terms of getting in contact with your FPO, your BEAD or your DE FPO within your state, and then from there making a connection to your state broadband office. Of course, you can go to the website and find the BEAD or the DE FPO on your own. But I just wanted to throw it out there that OMBI has tremendous value to minority stakeholders because we are here to help facilitate those important relationships for you and to make sure that you get the important access that you deserve. Now, we are receiving a lot of questions coming in from the chat. And I wanted to just say that in the interest of time, we're going to try to table those questions for the Q&A section at the end of our presentation, just so that we're able to keep things on track and going. But we welcome your questions and we'll get to them, as I said, at the end. And so now we're going to transition. You've heard great information coming from Amanda and coming from Lucy. And now what we're going to do, which I think is really great, is we're going to actually give you an opportunity to hear from some of our CMC grant awardees themselves, in their own words, talking to you about their efforts under workforce development and training. Okay, and so first, we're going to start with Brandon Dismore, who is the program coordinator and economic development and of the Economic Development and Training Center in Oklahoma State University Institute of Technology. And so, Brandon, I'm going to ask you to come to the floor and take it away. Over to you, Brandon.
All righty, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, hi, my name is Brandon Dinsmore, and I am from OSUIT, and it's our Workforce and Economic Development Department. And right now I'm a program coordinator for our NTIA grant. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how we got here. So about 2 years before the rollout was being talked about, our department started having internal conversations about the upcoming need for a pipeline of skilled fiber workers and how we could help to train them. About a year before the rollout, we decided to invest internal funds of over $100,000 in fiber equipment, curriculum development to outfit a lab for this training. We finally applied for NTIA funding so that we could offer the courses at no cost to participants, knowing full well that it wasn't going to be something everyone was aware of, and that would cause hesitation in participants questioning the cost of such training. Plus, our community here in Oklahoma is relatively low income, and money isn't really abundant. There's a large indigenous population, and it's a historically Black community. So along came our funding. When we received our NTIA grant funding, we were able to implement that program, our first set of courses, within 60 days. Our curriculum was already developed, our instructors were hired, our lab was set up. With everything set, we then needed students. That's when we began our community outreach and grassroots marketing efforts to get the word out without having to spend exorbitant sums of money to recruit. We utilized our relationships with local radio stations, community leaders, and elders within the community. Interest was incredibly high, and it still is to this day. We also deployed, as part of this program, wireless hotspots to underrepresented community members. And we were able to use those hotspots as icebreakers in conversations about the broadband rollout and our training program, plus the labor landscape that we knew was coming. So what have we done in the meantime? Well, we've trained 3 groups of students, approximately 15 to 25 in each group. Those numbers fluctuate because of natural things like attrition. And in this training, the students get 8 weeks of hands-on fiber technician training. They also get soft skills like resume writing and interview skills. This is a little bit different than aerial construction or outside plant or pole climbing, whatever you might want to call it. This is a more technical kind of work and a more technical kind of training for the fiber industry and the broadband rollout. We also set up career fairs that former, current, and prospective new students could attend to meet industry and hopefully find career opportunities. And we've deployed all of our hotspots now, which is about 100 in total. And speaking of career fairs, today we actually have one going on a couple of rooms over that was incredibly successful and a really, really cool thing to see with all of the students that showed up and a lot of the connections that they made. So now we're working on collaborating, and that's our message. We're collaborating with a lot of the tribes in the state to roll out variations of our programs in fiber. And we're also working with the Career Tech system, which in Oklahoma is VOTEC. We call it the Career Tech system. And we're using that to expand access to our training in various forms, like custom training, where you can sort of pick and choose what components you might need. A good example is a Career Tech has a lineman program that simply wants to add in a fiber splicing aspect to their program to upskill those students and make them more desirable to the industry. We work very closely with the State Broadband Office, the Broadband Governing Council, and the Broadband Expansion Council to get word out of the critical labor shortage that we can see coming, as well as to promote our students and our program. We know that this is a massive national public works action that requires collaboration from all of us, and the only way forward is together. Some of the lessons that we've learned along the way: internal purchasing can be a nightmare. I think you all probably know that sometimes. So I would say get to know your internal procurement procedures in advance. And if there is any way possible, make the investment ahead of time for equipment, training, instructors, lab space, etc. Don't wait until you receive funding to start planning and implementing your program, because this isn't really a question of how soon can we start. It's a question of how late are we already. We must proceed with expediency and concentrated effort to accomplish the goals set forward by this great broadband rollout. So the future, looking forward, industry interest and action is absolutely key to a successful rollout of such a program, and not just our program, but broadband rollout in every single state. Don't get bogged down in competition. We all know that in 50 years, Ken Burns is going to have great grandkids, and they're going to make a documentary called The Great Broadband Rollout. And we absolutely need the message to be one of unity, collaboration, and a great society doing what was essential and in the best interests of the people. No barriers to access, no restrictions based upon race or socioeconomic status. Simply put, with the help of NTIA and the Internet for All program, we believe that what we're doing is helping to create something that will be transformative and everlasting. And in closing, I would really like to thank our team, specifically Charles Harrison and Anna Hearn, for being so forward thinking with this and seizing this moment. I'd also like to give a quick shout out to our local NTIA representative, Kevin Blake. And then there's the Oklahoma Broadband Office, who's been very helpful, led by Mike Sanders with his team, MJ Barton, Eden Rolls, Dr. Jim Meek, Kirk Martin, and so many great other people. But last but not least, absolutely instrumental to all of this has been our FPO in DC, Michelle Lamel. We could not have done this without her, and I'd like to thank her so much for helping us with our mission. And I'll end my remarks there. Thank you all so much for having me.
Brandon, thank you. Thank you for those great words coming from the Connecting Minority Communities Pilot Program awardee, one of our awardees, who's basically giving insight in terms of how the award funding is being used towards workforce development, among other things, but really helping to make a difference with regards to helping to close the digital divide. Brandon, thank you so much for those comments. We're going to move on to our next CMC presenter, and that would be Amber Randolph. And Amber is the Senior Vice Chancellor for Administration and Economic Development and the Chief Financial Officer of Rutgers University. Amber, over to you, and welcome.
Thank
to
you. Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here and to be here with our community partner, Technogrid, who you'll hear from in just a moment. Really also wonderful to hear from Brandon. Terrific lessons learned as a CMC grantee. Certainly lessons we wish we had put in place before we started, but here we are, and we're so thrilled and excited about the grant and what we've been able to do so far with it and what's planned. So I'm going to follow a similar format to Brandon, and you'll see on the screen just a couple of slides, but mostly I'll be talking with you about how we got here. So Rutgers University Newark is a Hispanic serving institution. We've got about 11,000 undergrad and graduate students. As an anchor institution and an HSI, we are focused on social mobility and creating equities of pathway and opportunity. And one of our signature programs for several years has been a program called NJ STEP, New Jersey Scholarship Transformation and Education Program. It's a program that for many years was supported by our chancellor's office, and then in the last 3 or 4 years has been supported through meaningful state support, about $2.5 million. The program is focused as an association and a collaboration on higher education institutions in New Jersey, working in partnership with the New Jersey Department of Corrections and our state parole board to provide higher education courses towards a college degree, both inside prisons and incarcerated environments, and to assist with their transition to college life upon release from prison. And this was such an important, it has always been an important program to, at Rutgers University Newark. To date, we've had hundreds of students obtain degrees inside, completing pathways to BAs, masters, and beyond, when they exit their incarcerated environment. But one of our most challenging areas has been really supporting these individuals post-release with both digital equity skills, and we have noticed that this population is especially disconnected digitally, and job placement. Given the pace of technology and change, we've seen a lot of issues. When the CMC grant opportunity became available, we decided it was a really important opportunity to pilot some of the digital equity strategies for this population, as well as other vulnerable populations within our community. Those are residents from the city of Newark, residents with a very low AMI, Pell eligible residents. We've got about 60% of our population is Pell eligible. And so we really decided to put together an application to CMC via NTIA that was focused on closing the digital equity gaps for that population, for those populations. And through our partnerships as an anchor institution with other anchors and community development groups in the city and partners like Technogrid, we developed a comprehensive community-based multi-stakeholder program that was funded through the CMC. And we're very, very grateful for that funding. With that funding and with our application through NJ STEP, thank you so much for that, Michelle. Through our application, we're focused on what we're calling a Creating Connections Collaboratory with really 5 prongs. These are amorphous and evolving, but at the core of them, they really remain the same. With the first goal of creating a more connected campus, so using our building footprint and the footprint we have within the city of Newark to expand wireless and broadband around the campus to about 24 locations. Our next pillar is about enhancing the digital resources and technology for residents in RCRPs, or these residential community environments, basically parochially known as halfway houses, residential community release programs, where residents are completing their sentence. So again, really focusing on closing digital gaps for that population. The third is creating digital readiness and digital fluency programs, not only for our most vulnerable populations, but also expanding that throughout the city of Newark, both taking an inventory of existing digital readiness and digital fluency programs, and also trying to fill gaps and using the CMC grant to do that. fourth, and this is where you'll hear more from Technogrid, focusing on digital economy jobs and preparing our population and our citizenry for those jobs through meaningful workforce training and development with our subgrantee and partner Technogrid. And lastly, taking all that data, taking all that learning, taking what we're able to assess through these process, the failures and the wins, and putting that into a better understanding of those gaps, pulling data, making that data accessible to as many people as possible, and creating a real table of digital equity practitioners to come together and keep refining. So I'm happy for you to take the slide down if you want to, Michelle, or you can keep it up. But that funding, again, has really allowed us to focus on this incarcerated population. And that Department of Corrections partnership is what made that possible in our application. They not only provided letters of support in our application, but meaningful support, allowing us access to the RCRPs, to those residences, and allowing us the opportunity to explore how can we use the grant to not only change through the pilot resources, spaces that are currently, these are units, multiple housing units, staff in those buildings, but they're still on dial-up. So how could we use the grant to actually convert that, but at the same time, and even more meaningfully, bring this digital skills training to that population? And so that's been a tremendous opportunity for us. We've been meeting. What we've done in the meantime since receiving the grant, we've not yet started the training program. You'll hear from Marlon a bit about where we are, but we've been having meetings with the Department of Corrections. And as you can imagine, as a big institution, as big as that, with their mandate, it's a lot for them to get to the table, but it has not been a hard sell at all. I think they're completely committed to this work. They're completely committed to creating opportunities to change the trajectory and shape of opportunity for formerly incarcerated people. But this has also been done in partnership with Newark Fiber, which is our Newark broadband provider, and Technogrid's workforce development training. So what we've done is we've actually determined that 50% of our workforce training cohort will be from these RCRPs, and the other 50% will be coming from our local workforce planning board, with about 12 or so trainees each year during the grant period. This has been a real collaboration. When we think about collaboration, it is multi-pronged. It is at all levels. We've got the chancellor's office at our institution. We've got senior leadership as well as the mayor's office, all supporting and putting resources into making sure that our overall CMC programmatic goals are met, but certainly a focus on the workforce development piece. When we think about lessons learned, I would say the planning for, especially when we're talking about a population that's been structurally excluded, digitally disconnected, there's a real intentionality. I agree with Brandon and my colleagues, the pace of change is just insufficient. It's very slow. But there is a level of intentionality and planning that is required to support this population appropriately. And so I think we are clear that we will get better outcomes, and if we can be clear on who's doing what, how are the resources being managed. I think, again, procurement's a big deal, but are we really all on the same page, because we really want to get this right? I would also say, and I think my colleague MJ will speak more about this, that recruiting through the RCRPs is a high touch but low tech process. It requires a level of support, coordination, and supervision with the Department of Corrections that our colleagues at Technogrid are absolutely up for, as well as the leadership of NJ STEP, but it is a process and it does take time. And it's been very important that we get the Department of Corrections comfortable with our workforce training, with the workforce training program, with that recruitment process, with that supervision observation process. I would also say that I think, when we think about the program itself, it's very important that through a workforce development program, which does, and Technogrid will talk about this, does compensate participants for the time that they're doing training, which is really key for a person who's incarcerated or ending the term of their incarceration. What's terrific is that through the RCRPs, they've solved for the housing challenge. We're in a high-cost city, like so many other cities where our colleagues are. it is very hard to afford housing. And while these workforce training opportunities are terrific, there's very little subsidy to support safe, suitable, and secure housing while they're in these programs. So the fact that they have housing through the Department of Corrections, they're getting compensated for their training and coming out with certification skills, et cetera, we think is really key. Lastly, I'll just wrap up and say that when we think about the future of what's possible with our CMC grant, we're ready to get started with our training program, finalize our MOU with the Department of Corrections, and we want to use that as a model for engaging other institutions who are supporting other vulnerable and underrepresented populations. We also see the opportunity to use the CMC grant to push the needle on employers who will be employing individuals coming out of workforce training programs like Technogrids. We know that there's a lot to, we can train people, but we need to make sure that on the other end, they're being employed. And so we're looking at about ways we can use the grant to leverage partnerships with the Second Chance Coalition, which is promoting benefits of second chance employers or helping them see the benefits as a second chance employer of this population. And other internet service providers who may have a hurdle to cover by thinking about employing this population whose minds we really want to change about the possibilities and opportunities. So I will stop there and just again, extend my thanks to NTIA for this opportunity, extend thanks to our partner at Technogrid, MJ, who you'll hear from momentarily. Thank you so much for the time.
Amber, thank you so much for sharing that great information coming from the work that you were doing as a CMC awardee. And I have to say that, I'm paraphrasing the president, but President Biden, in terms of his mantra or his slogan as it pertains to broadband, which is NTIA's slogan, which is to provide internet for all. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, he said, I don't want to provide internet service for some. I'd like to provide internet for all. And thanks to the CMC program and all of NTIA's suite of diverse grants, which are addressing key portions of broadband, we are doing just that. We are helping to close the digital divide. The work that we are doing under OMBI is impactful, as you have heard. You've just heard from Amber and the other speakers in terms of seeing how the CMC awardees are affecting real people, real lives, making changes utilizing broadband. And I think that success story is really an important thing to focus upon. OMBI was created under the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. So we're a new office, but the good thing is that this office is here. This office is here, just as the name suggests, to help to facilitate the closing of the digital divide and to create greater opportunities for people of color and for other vulnerable populations, as Amber mentioned, as well as veterans and seniors, making a real difference. That's what we're doing here at NTIA and OMBI. We're going to move on to our third and last presenter, and that is Marlon MJ Jenkins. And Marlon is the founder and CEO of Technogrid. And we're going to welcome him to come to on camera to make his presentation. Marlon?
Yes.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hughes, and to NTIA and OMBI. I'm very happy to be able to join. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to say thank you to Amber, my colleague at Rutgers, for introducing the program, the framework of the program through the CMC Connected Minority Communities Grant. It's something that's going to be pivotal within the region of the New York metro area, specifically in New Jersey, as Amber had so eloquently mentioned. My name is Marlon Jenkins, founder and CEO of Technogrid. Have about 25 5 years in the telecommunications arena. I've worked for organizations such as T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T. I decided about 3 years ago to start an apprenticeship program. We started really slow, but we've evolved it since, and so we can kind of carve in. I don't want to take up much time, so I'm going to just fly through these slides. Next slide, please. So Technogrid is a infrastructure company, and so we build smart cities. Part of our customer base is we target private sector, public sector clients such as government, in order to be able to create a model such as we've done for not just for the work, but also now being more inclusive of training underserved individuals in the realm of wireless and fiber optics technology, aka broadband. And so again, we've been in business for the last close to 14 years. And I decided to take my experience and put it into really good use to be able to train people in underserved communities to be part of the broadband evolution. Next slide. So we've served many clients, right? And so as all businesses, right, the goal is to become profitable, right? I kind of did a little something different where I started investing. I took the monies that we were making from the business and invested it into creating training and curriculum. And so we created curriculum that aligned with the broadband, fiber optics, and wireless technologies. We developed a learning management system, an LMS, meaning our training can be taken online, basically anywhere throughout the country as long as you have an internet connection. But not just the online training, it also ties with related technical instruction and on-the-job training as well. Next slide. Here's some of the types of work that we do. It's really deeply embedded in broadband technology. As you can see, wireless technologies, 5G, we have our technicians basically from the classroom. Pre-apprenticeship is where we start, is about 6 weeks. We roll into the apprenticeship model. Our technicians are paid, right? So it's on the job training. So they're paid basically from day one. And so after they get to a certain point, they then get an opportunity to apply those skills. And such work as we're talking about is shown here in the smart buildings infrastructure, smart city infrastructures, etc. Next slide. And so we created kind of like a beautiful loop, right? And so our goal is to scale up candidates from these communities, right? People who haven't had traditionally opportunities to work in telecommunications and technology. Some people don't think that they have the skills, which was what we've been finding, right? Parts of the lessons learned is that people don't think they have it sometimes, right? Whether it's men or women, sometimes they don't want to go up in bucket trucks. And so what we've done is accommodated them, right? If you don't want to do this, everyone knows in the realms of any business, specifically in this arena of telecommunications and broadband, there's multiple opportunities to be able to get your skills up. You don't have to necessarily be running fiber, doing wireless. You could be working in the back office, supporting IT help desk, etc. And so we're basically creating a digital workforce that can really encapsulate various tandems of operations as it relates to telecommunications and within the telecommunications arena. Next slide. And so as mentioned, our overview, so we train fiber apprentices, wireless technicians to become apprentices. We start off as a pre-apprenticeship model because sometimes, yeah, a job in the career is something that most people want, right? But not everybody not everyone after they get into, say, a certain industry such as telecommunications, they decide that there's not necessarily the right fit for them. And so what we do is we vet them out for 6 weeks, right, through a pre-apprenticeship model, just to make sure it's the right fit for us, the right fit for them, vice versa. After that, we roll into a full out apprenticeship training program. Part of the skills, even from the first 6 weeks, they're getting OSHA 30 certifications, basic electrical training, first aid and safety, professional skills and ethics, anti-harassment. And then after that, after earning those certifications, again, they move into the apprenticeship model and they're earning more certifications, not just non-industry certifications, OSHA 30, fiber optics, wireless. And after that model is completed initially, we move into basically the program's a year long, right? 12 to 14 months. After the 12 to 14 months, the candidate then receives a certification through the federal government. We're partnered with the US DOL, and they receive an apprenticeship certification either for fiber optics and or wireless. And the total length of the program is 2,000 hours. And it's fully paid for under the CMC opportunity that we're working with OMBI and NTIA. Next slide. Altering life trajectories. And so I think if we can, I would like to, I don't know if the video is ready. Again, I don't want to take up too much more time. If we can potentially pull the video and show it, that would be great. It's only about 2 minutes long, 2.5, somewhere around there. This area is actually the area that I went to school in. Actually, this is where I used to get off the school bus. Growing up in the city of Newark, not really having a lot. A little bit more volume, please. Rubber bands around my socks so they wouldn't fall down in the wintertime. Thank you. We've been able to take those humble beginnings and turn those beginnings around to make a future for people like myself and underserved and urban communities. And now we're doing training. From day one, we start training them on professional etiquette, then safety. We have instructor-led fiber optics course where instructor actually comes in and the students get a full dose of what it takes to handle fiber, splice fiber, test fiber, etc. Then they're running fiber. They're actually installing fiber at utility poles and they're bringing that fiber into a hub location to then connect it to switching devices.
Just the idea of having that one little fiber that can transmit so much, that's information, that's power right there.
It connects everything from home internet, phone service, cable providers, so it's helping us better our city.
Our apprentices, throughout the course of 6 months, even the first 3 months, they're probably getting about 8 certifications ranging from OSHA 30, fiber optics, if it's in construction, rigging, and then taking it up to a proliferation level of cybersecurity. Not everyone wants to work out in the field. That's fine. Not everyone wants to be in bucket trucks. Some people are scared of heights, no matter if you give them 10 harnesses. We want to meet people where they are. We want to give them the complete suitcase to be able to have their bags packed wherever they go with their resume. They'll never return where they started from.
Yeah, no, this is definitely not your typical office job. It gets you on your feet a lot. A great opportunity to get some exercise because we travel all over Jersey, sometimes even to New York, different state.
Like the second week, we were running microduct at an unfinished apartment down on Irvin Turner.
We're outside in the bucket truck, we're in here. You know, we learn different things, and I feel like we're a family here.
Some of us hang out outside the job and everything, but once we in here, hands-on, teamwork.
It makes coming to work fun. The ultimate goal is financial freedom, and I definitely think Technogrid will have a hand in providing that for myself and my family.
Just seeing my resume grow from the things that I had on it to what it has on it now is uncomparable. I would describe this program as a start to something bigger.
Growing up in a tough environment, somebody helped me along the way. The least that I can do is kind of pay it forward. It's very, very fulfilling knowing that we're not just deploying technology, we're training apprentices to be able to involve communities to help support this evolution of broadband and IT in the telecommunications sector. Thank you. So one of the last gentlemen that spoke about, the opportunity of being able to build those skill sets, Joshua Thompson, he's now working for the Newark Fiber Network as a program manager. And so just a prime example of what this program and what these programs that we have at our fingertips can do for people within urban communities. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm grateful and look forward to working with you, Amber. Looking forward to helping to rescue some of those ex-offenders. And, one of my things that I always say is that in telecommunications and technology or field operations, we tend to work the guys and girls so hard out in the field. About time they get home, they don't have time to get into trouble. Marlon Jenkins, Technogrid, over and out.
Marlon, thank you so much for your comments and for that video, which was really impactful. It was great, especially to see young women as a part of the training process that you are undergoing. It's great that we are touching all bases and really reaching out to groups that perhaps have not had that many opportunities in broadband, such as women,
Absolutely.
such as incarcerated individuals, veterans, seniors, and just in general, people of color. These are the important points that we really want to hit home. That obviously your program is doing, but across the board, we have 93 CMC awardees. Now today we focused on 3 of them who have workforce development as a key component of their work, but we want to make sure to reference that with 93 awardees, 93 important and individual programs which represent different approaches to closing the digital divide. We want to make sure that we show our love and of course our respect for those awardees as well, who obviously were not focused for today's broadcast, but remain an important part of the OMBI CMC family. And so now we're going to open up the floor for questions in the short amount of time that we have. This has really been a very productive and informative webinar. And so we want to take any questions that you guys may have for any of our panelists. Or as well, panelists, if you guys want to jump in with any final remarks, we can do it that way as well. When it comes to what we covered here today, I think that it's very important. I think we presented a really full-bodied approach to the subject of workforce development, going from Amanda's presentation in terms of closing the digital skills divide and what higher education leaders need to know, and then transitioning to NTIA's efforts with regards to opportunities for people of color under the various IJA programs, which we heard from Lucy on, and then pivoting over to our presentations coming from our CMC awardees, from Brandon and from Amber and from Marlon, talking about workforce development underneath the programs that they are working on. We really got a full breadth of what broadband can mean when it comes to workforce development in terms of closing the digital divide. So I'll ask Amanda, with regards to what you spoke about, just a few closing remarks in terms of what are some of the things specifically that institutions of higher learning can really do to help make a full impact for their students and faculty and surrounding anchor communities?
I'd flag two things in particular. One, make sure that you're finding a way to capture the expertise that your students are already bringing to the table, right? We often spend a lot of time thinking about what people don't have or what they lack, but people are often very creative and entrepreneurial in having come up with solutions, even in low resource environments. So even if they've been incarcerated, even if they've been working in a really low wage job. So what process does your educational institution have in place for helping students lift up what they're already good at and then build from the skills they have to the additional skills they need? That's the first point. And the second point is really making sure that you're bringing in employer partners at every stage of the process to help inform not just career technical education programs, but other degree granting programs to really close the loop between what people are learning in the classroom and the real world ways they can apply that in their working lives. I see that there's a question in the chat for Brandon and Marlon around their recruiting methods for their programs. So Kevin, let me turn it back to you in case you want to capture that or other questions.
Okay, well, I'll let Brandon and Marlon jump in on that really quickly and bring them into the conversation.
Go ahead, Marlon.
Go ahead. Yep.
Okay.
So for us, thanks for that question. So for us, we work with the New Jersey Department of Labor. We work with the local one-stops. We send out marketing materials to them so that way they can promote what we're doing. A lot of our process through our marketing materials, it's like automated. And so candidates that are interested, they apply through a link. That link then comes over to our database. I approve. They get to then schedule a interview with me through my calendar automatically. And that's basically how we recruit. Myself, I go out into the community and I kind of find people as well, right? I just go out and I bring in candidates, and some people look at me like I'm crazy. Like, what are you asking me for? And I say, I want to change your life. And they says, okay. And so we have it at 80% retention rate currently.
Awesome.
So,
Brandon?
Can I add something to Marlon's recruitment? If I could?
Go ahead, Amber. Yes.
One of the things I think is stretched Marlon, but he's up for it, is that recruiting at the RCRPs, which are basically, prisons outside of a traditional prison space, is that we have to actually work with the staff to get in certain times of the day for manual signups, morning and night, because some of them are working or outside of the residence, and kind of really shifting this online, very sophisticated way and easy way to a much more manual for that population in that environment. And
that's right.
A great process to learn how to do that differently.
So through the MOU, Amber, you're right. We're making some changes relative to recruiting from the RCRPs with the manual process, with the paperwork, which I don't think it'd be a huge issue, right? We'll just print the application, have people, the folks that are interested in the halfway houses apply, and we'll interview them the same way. And based on how that interview goes, they'll be a part of the program. And a lot of the things that I've heard from the Department of Corrections is that the candidates that have already heard about the program, they're kind of getting sick and tired of, I don't want to say that, but they want to change, right? From working at McDonald's and, warehouses and stuff like that. And so they're very excited that they'll be part of a telecommunications technology training program, and their lives will definitely be changed. So Amber,
awesome.
Kudos.
We're a little bit tight on time. Brandon, I wanted to bring you in really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the biggest issue is just convincing people that this is the right move for them. So we can find inroads into a population and we can talk to them, but the response kind of indicates, yeah, we've heard this before. Kind of like what Marlon was saying, they get kind of sick of the same old. So really the hardest part was getting people to understand, no, this is a path forward. This is something that is definitely coming down the pike, and just essentially working with them on that. Once you get the people to listen and be open and receptive to that, it was very easy for word to spread.
Yep.
What percentage, really quickly, what percentage of program participants are getting placed? You
How
guys,
do you mean? How do you mean percentage? Just period in the whole program?
right,
Oklahoma is a little bit behind, I would say, in our deployment of the rollout. So our percentages are kind of low right now. We just had a career fair today, though, that actually just ended. So I'm interested to see how many jobs actually came out of that, because I know there was quite a bit of interest in all of the students there. So I think that hit me up tomorrow. I have a feeling that number is going to be totally different than what I just told you.
great.
Hey,
Marlon?
Brandon, I would love to talk to you, Brandon. So our retention rate, basically, after the 6 weeks of the pre-apprenticeship program, those folks become employees of Technogrid. And so my job is to create work, right? So that way they
Right.
have the opportunities. And so sometimes the apprentices come in and they think that it's like, like a Cinderella story. No, it's not a Cinderella story, because these are real customers that we're working for. And if you come into their network causing their fiber to go offline, it's going to be a problem, and Technogrid's going to have some issues with the customers. So it's
Right.
real work, it's real jobs. People get paid to start off at 18 per hour after that 6-week mark.
Right.
They get benefits, personal time off. They get paid. Well, we pay bi-weekly, and it's through direct deposit through ADP. So they love it.
Good paying jobs in broadband. We love that. Lucy, here at NTIA, obviously we're living, the experience of trying to close the digital divide and providing connectivity, internet for all. Your final comments in terms of, obviously IJA and opportunities for communities of color under IJA. Your final comments.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. And thanks everyone for the engagement. I think I will reiterate what I kind of closed my presentation with, which is that the BEAD program is a huge opportunity, not just to connect everyone in America to high-speed internet, but also to, we like to say this is not just a broadband program, it's also a jobs program. And so to give people opportunities, not just for that first job and the infrastructure build out, but for long-term career pathways. And so I will just reiterate that this is a program that's taking place in all 50 states, in DC, Puerto Rico, and 4 of our US territories. Get involved in the planning process that's happening in your state. Reach out to those state broadband offices. In many cases, workforce is a new, is a new priority for them as a result of our requirements around workforce plans. And they will need your expertise and your recommendations as they're developing their plans. So make sure you have a seat at those tables.
Great. Thank you, Lucy. Amber, I'd like to bring you in for your final comments.
Yeah, no, it's been just terrific to be able to have a resource like CMC, not just the grant proceeds, but all of the NTIA support, our amazing federal program officer, our local state broadband officer. They're really helping us build out what was a bunch of different programmatic ideas and great intention into a strategy that can be much better prepared to leverage the dollars and resources that are coming, and we think are going to have tremendous impact on the residents in the city of Newark.
Thank you. Brandon, any final comments?
No, this has just been a fantastic thing for me. I can't believe the difference that we're making in these people's lives. I just really am truly honored to have been a part of this. So a lot of the times you just see me being dumbstruck and awestruck by it all. It's just a fantastic program. And I'm really just trying to soak in a lot of what we've heard, especially from MJ and some of the others today, and how we might be able to implement some of those things in our program. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. And in the interest of time, that is going to do it for our presentation, our webinar for today. First off, before we close out, I would like to first thank our OMBI regional rep and CMC FPO, Michelle Lamel, for putting together this very informative and successful webinar. Michelle, she's behind the scenes. We have a lot of people behind the scenes, but Michelle is kind of wrangling everyone and making sure that this goes well. It went well. And Michelle, I want to make sure to give you your credit and your due. Thank you. We want to thank all of our presenters for the information that they provided to all of our stakeholders. Amanda Bergzon-Shilcock, Senior Fellow, National Skills Coalition. Lucy Moore, Special Policy Advisor, Office of the Assistant Secretary of NTIA. Brandon Dismore, Program Coordinator, Economic Development and Training Center, Oklahoma State University Institute of Technology. Amber Randolph, Senior Vice Chancellor for Administration and Economic Development and Chief Financial Officer, Rutgers University. And Marlon M.J. Jenkins, Founder and CEO of TechnoGrid. Thank you to all my friends. And on the behalf of NTIA and the Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives, we say thanks to all and thank you for participating in today's webinar. If you have any questions or would like to reach out to the Office of Minority Broadband Initiatives, you can email us at ombioutreach@nta.gov, and one of our regional representatives will reach out to you. So again, on the behalf of NTIA and OMBI, thank you for participating and do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you so much.